care what Pastor says, it's felt like a long week to me. It's been a troubling week. 8 days ago, a white supremacist targeting the Latinx community shot and killed 22 people and injured 24 others in an El Paso Walmart. This past week, in what I don't know how to describe as anything other than an act of terrorism, ICE carried out the largest raid in a decade, arresting 680 people from 7 food processing plants across Mississippi.
Right.
And all week long, there have been reports of ICE in the city of Little Rock.
Yeah.
What do we do with this kind of trauma? And in order to make sense of this question, I'd like to turn to what at first glance may seem like a peculiar text. When I was thinking about using this text, I realized, well, about a year ago I preached this story, but I figured I used the Mark version of the text so I'd be okay. But then a month and a half ago I didn't see until last night, Pastor just preached from this text, so you're going to get a double dose. But, I thought maybe we could turn to Leviticus instead, which commands us to love the alien as ourselves. Reminds us that cursed is anyone who withholds justice from the foreigner,
Right.
the fatherless, or the widow. We could have gone to Matthew 25, which teaches us that giving food to the hungry, drink to the thirsty, and hospitality to the stranger, that in so doing we have extended the same unto God. We could have gone to Colossians and remembered that the church has no borders.
Right.
There's neither Jew nor Greek. But instead we go to Luke 8, 26 through 39. And for the readers of Luke's gospel, the word legion here has a clear meaning.
Yeah.
It's a large unit of the Roman army. And the man we read about is possessed by a legion.
Right.
They are naked, homeless, in chains, and living among the tombs, among death,
Yeah.
because of legion.
Right.
And because the author knows that we're a little bit dense, they use military language all throughout the text.
Right. Right.
Jesus meets the person with demons, and the verb here for meet is the same word used to describe two armies confronting one another in battle. Jesus confronts the powers and principalities. Jesus confronts legion. Luke describes the person being seized by the demon. The word seized is the same word used elsewhere to describe people being arrested and brought to trial.
Right.
There were 680 people arrested to be brought to trial last week. And then the term herd of pigs seems inappropriate. Pigs don't travel in herds, so something's up. But if you dig a little deeper, you see that the word herd here is the same word used to describe a band of military recruits.
Right.
Jesus drives out demons into a herd of pigs and over the mountain. This morning's text isn't just another story about healing.
That's right.
not just another story about exorcism. It's a story about the brutality of Roman occupation, one that drives a person out of the land unto death. This is a story about a militarized police force, one that seizes, one that arrests an already marginalized people. This force is not unlike the one that raided 7 food processing plants last week in Mississippi. ICE is legion.
That's right. That's right.
We live in a nation possessed. White supremacy and xenophobia run rampant. And when announcing his candidacy for president in 2015, Donald Trump made this clear when he says, when Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those people with us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're bringing rapists. And some, I assume, are good people. We live in a nation possessed. And if there's any question about that, we're going to take some time to remember what has happened in the last few years. Within the first week of his presidency, Trump tried to bar Muslims from 7 countries from entering the U.S. and signed an executive order directing the Department of Homeland Security to target anyone who'd entered the country, quote, illegally, regardless of whether they were otherwise law-abiding. By the end of Trump's first year, the Department of Homeland Security had begun a pilot program for the zero-tolerance policy in El Paso, Texas, and announced it would, quote, waive certain laws to begin construction of the wall near Calexico, California. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced the repeal of DACA. Trump announced Presidential Proclamation 9645, adding Venezuela and North Korea to the list of affected countries, thereby making it not exclusively a Muslim ban. We live in a nation possessed, and if there's any question about that, here's some of what happened in Trump's second year in office. The Supreme Court upheld the ban. The Justice Department announced quotas for immigration judges to complete cases faster. The Trump administration said it expects 700 cases completed with a 15% appeal rate each year. Attorney General Jeff Sessions directed federal prosecutors to, quote, to adopt immediately a zero-tolerance policy for all offenses related to the misdemeanor of, quote, illegally entering the U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that the administration would prosecute parents who enter the U.S., quote, illegally with their children, saying, this is Jeff Sessions, if you cross this border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. If you smuggle an illegal alien across the border, then we'll prosecute you. If you're smuggling a child, then we're going to prosecute you, and that child will be separated from you, probably as required by law. As a caravan of more than 1,000 people, mostly from Honduras, journeyed to the U.S. from Mexico, Trump deployed anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 National Guard troops to the U.S.-Mexico border. U.S. border officers shot tear gas and pepper balls at asylum seekers at the Tijuana border crossing. Despite the Senate unanimously passing a bill to fund the government, the bill was not taken up by the Republican-controlled House because it lacked the $5.7 billion needed to fund a border wall, partially shutting down the U.S. government. By December 2018, nearly 15,000 migrant children were being held in government custody. On December 8, 2018, a 7-year-old girl died just hours after being taken into custody by Border Patrol agents in New Mexico, and an 8-year-old boy being held by Border Protection died on Christmas Eve. We live in a nation possessed. Just in case there's any confusion about that, here are some quotes from Donald Trump in the year 2018. Donald Trump said, "Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here? Why do we need more Haitians? Take them out." Donald Trump said, "We have people coming into this country or trying to come in, and we're stopping a lot of them, but we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals, and we're taking them out of the country at a level and at a rate that's never happened before. And because of the weak laws, they come in fast. We get them. We release them. We get them again. We bring them out. It's crazy." Donald Trump said, "Open borders equals crime, tremendous crime, the hardest kind of crime." Donald Trump said, "We cannot allow all these people to invade our country. When somebody comes in, we must immediately, with no judges or court cases, bring them back from where they came." In the first 2 years of Trump's administration, there were 302,051 administrative arrests, 538,804 detentions, 482,204 interior and border removals, 666,706 apprehensions made at the southwest border. We live in a nation possessed, and if you don't believe me, this year, the Department of Homeland Security has announced that it has stepped up its collection of biometric data from migrant families to include a DNA testing pilot program and the fingerprinting of children under the age of 14. 8 days ago, a white supremacist shot and killed 22 people, injuring 24 others at an El Paso Walmart. His manifesto stated he wanted to, quote, "stop a Hispanic invasion of Texas." And this kind of terror doesn't happen in a vacuum. Trump has frequently used the word invasion to describe undocumented immigrants. Do you remember the tweet from June 2018? Trump said, "We cannot allow all of these people to invade our country. When somebody comes in, we must immediately, with no judges or court cases, bring them back to where they came from." He amped up his invasion talk that November, shortly before the midterm elections, as a part of his scare tactics concerning the Central American caravan. Trump said, "It's like an invasion. They have violently overrun the Mexican border. This isn't an accident." Last week, the New York Times reported that more than 2,000 Facebook ads from Trump's re-election campaign have used the word invasion.
Yes, right. Yes.
This past week, children came home from their first day at school to empty houses. While they were away, ICE carried out the largest raid in a decade, arresting 680 people from 7 food processing plants across Mississippi. We live in a nation possessed. And while the demons may look a bit different, the author of this morning's text understood what it means to also live in a possessed nation.
Right.
The image of this man, isolated from his community, naked and in chains, overcome by the power of these demons and living in the tombs, oppressed by Roman legions. And legion here doesn't only affect this one person, it affects the entire community of Gerasa. In this story, we can see that they are afraid, for they too are under threat of militarized violence. To be possessed means that something outside of you, some force of evil, takes root inside of you, claims you as its own. And I wonder what it was like for this demon-possessed man in Luke. I wonder when exactly they became possessed. Perhaps they experienced some kind of trauma. Perhaps it began slowly. Perhaps it came all at once. And I wonder how they felt about the demons. I wonder if after a while it got confusing to sort out which parts of himself was him and which part was the demons. I wonder if he was so deeply affected by this trauma, if he had so deeply internalized this oppression that he couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah.
And then Jesus shows up.
Right.
What does exorcism look like today? I'm reminded of some activists in Nashville. Recently, for 2 weeks, people had been spotting an unmarked white Ford F-150 circling the streets of a Nashville neighborhood called Hermitage. Eventually, the truck turned on its red and blue lights and stopped their neighbor as he and his 12-year-old son left their home. Inside the truck were 2 ICE agents who'd been waiting since before sunrise. They had an administrative order granting them permission to detain the father, who had lived in the community for 14 years or so, they said they had. Hours later, the agents left empty-handed.
Right.
Neighbors worked together to block the man's arrest.
Right.
Onlookers urged the father and his son to stay in their vehicle and began live streaming the standoff. Hours passed. The temperature rose to 90 degrees. Neighbors made sure that the father and son had damp rags to keep them cool in the summer heat.
Right.
They brought sandwiches. They refilled the gas tank so that they could keep the vehicle's air conditioner running.
Right.
And meanwhile, ICE officers tried to convince them to step out of the van. They dangled the possibility of cash rewards in front of them. They told the boy and his father that they would have to get out eventually. They lied, claiming the administrative order that they had written themselves gave them arresting authority.
Yeah.
And after about 4 hours, they gave up and left. Activists, neighbors, and community members surrounded the van, forming a human chain, lining the pathway all the way to the family home. And they opened the van's door, and the father and son raced inside the house under the protection of their neighbors.
Right.
And cheers erupted from the crowd as the front door slammed behind them.
Right.
What does exorcism look like?
Right.
It means confronting the powers and the principalities. Jesus can only exorcise this demon because he's there facing off against the demon. ICE is in Little Rock, and you may come face to face with them. What does exorcism look like? I think it looks a hell of a lot like activism.
Right.
It looks a hell of a lot like confronting these powers
Right.
and principalities.
That's right.
May it be so among us. Amen.